Hey Engine Builder fans, welcome back to an episode of Industry Insiders. I'm Greg Jones, and today my host is Jesse Jones. He is the president of Engine Parts Group and Engine Pro. Jesse, thanks so much for being here in the studio today with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, you've been in this industry for about 40 years, give or take, and you've been around a long time, and I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with you and know your name. Mm-hmm. But for the folks that might not be familiar with you, give everybody just a quick rundown of your background and a couple of places that you've been in your career.
Sure. So I'm an old automotive brat from way back. My family used to be in the car dealerships in western Pennsylvania and western New York. So I started out working in the shop doing mechanical work for my father that he figured I couldn't screw up too bad. Yeah. And then figured, man, this is a hard way to make a living. So I started working in the parts department and, basically doing all the odd jobs around the dealership. So I decided, obviously, my course was set, and this was in late 70s. And I went to college to get into the automotive business. And as you'll all remember, about that time, we're kind of going through it now, inflation was through the roof.
Sure.
Being in the car dealer business was probably pretty rough. And I changed courses and went into the automotive aftermarket. I started my career with Dana. Mm-hmm. I was a field rep living down in Springfield, Missouri, calling on O'Reilly's when O'Reilly's only had 50, 60 stores.
Right.
It was a great education for me because you really saw the emerging of the retail business.
Yep.
And they, of course, serviced the wholesale business as well. And there was the whole portfolio. It was engine parts, it was chassis parts, hydraulics, you name it. So it was a really good education for me to see all the different types of shops, etc. And I worked my way up through Dana. I was a product manager, a marketing specialist, and ended up going through several acquisitions. We acquired Clevite later on. And, of course, I moved up to Ann Arbor to work up there and ran the gasket product group there for a while. And then I migrated into the marketing group and ran that for a while. And then left there, went back to Dana after it was acquired. Mala acquired the old Dana Engine Parts Group, and I went back to Dana a couple years after that to run the global product planning for their light vehicle and heavy duty drivetrain.
Yeah.
And so, long and the short of it, I've been in the engine parts business. I've been in the automotive business aftermarket for. Scares me when you said that, 40 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's coming up on 40 years.
That's excellent. Well, again, we appreciate you being here today. And, obviously your newest company here is with, as president of the Engine Parts Group and Engine Pro. And, you started in February 2020, which, again, in 2 years, but felt like a decade. But
yeah, we had 1 month of normalcy, and then the pandemic hit.
So obviously, I want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
Coming into the company, what were some of those things that you saw that needed to get changed as president? What were some of those initiatives that you had, and how did it change throughout the course of 2020 and to today?
Well, of course, the initial reaction was panic, right? Oh my God, what's going to happen here? We had one down month, March, because I think everything was in upheaval.
Yeah, people didn't really know what was happening.
Right.
Yeah.
And after that, everything just took off like a rocket ship. And honestly, it hasn't really slowed down in the last 2.5 years.
Yeah.
We've been fortunate from the standpoint of the way we go to market. We're kind of insular. It's not like we've got a ton of people coming in off the street to meet with us, and we were fortunate to be designated an essential business.
Right.
So we stayed open for business, and thank God we did, because business just soared. We all know what's happened on the OE production side, supply chain issues and all this, and honestly, I don't want it to slow down, trust me, but it's been a challenge for the last 2.5 years.
Yeah.
We're a pretty, I'll call it staid old business, the way things have been done for years. And our challenge is to morph into the new reality here, but also not leave behind what made us our
Right.
core business.
Right.
Right. We talked about it a little bit earlier about what a typical machine shop looks like, and the images do not match reality.
Yeah.
These are professional facilities. These guys are very technically oriented. They have to be, because the engines that we work on
Sure.
are extremely technical.
It demands that. Yeah.
Yep. And as a consequence, we've been covered up. Most of our shops that we call on are 2.5-month backlogs.
Yep.
Some of it's because of parts, but most of it's because of demand, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that OE can't ship parts as well, or ship vehicles, has certainly helped our situation as well.
Sure.
Yep.
So, Jesse, you just mentioned some of the challenges, and obviously that's sourcing parts. There's a little bit of pricing involved, just that supply chain and timeline stuff going on. Do you want to talk about what's kind of top of mind for you today in terms of those challenges?
Well, the supply chain is probably the overriding problem we have. Certainly, we've had price increases like everybody has had. And normally, the pushback we get on pricing, I'm not saying anybody's happy when we pass on prices, but everybody understands the costs of everything have gone through the roof. Our biggest challenge is get the parts.
Yeah.
I'm sure other folks would have sat in the seat, have told stories of, a vehicle is sitting there, can't move for 2 months because we can't get a simple $5 part.
Right.
A lot of that's been the case. Think about our business. We're selling engine parts. So all the components that go inside of an engine, all it takes is one piece to be on back order, or we can't get our hands on.
Yeah.
You're shut down.
Yeah.
And that's been our challenge.
Yeah.
Often we say it takes 5 times the effort now to make a single sale than it did 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Because our folks got to call all these different places.
Yeah.
To ensure we have, robust supply chain.
Right.
So it's been a challenge.
And Jesse, we were talking earlier about, where you guys are sourcing parts from, and how the last couple of years has changed some of the mentality around, who you might have worked with, in years past versus, today. You just have to get the part, like you said. So, you don't have to mention necessarily who you're working with,
Sure.
but do you want to talk about that change in mentality and getting
Sure.
parts?
Well, obviously, we're in a business of loyalties, right? You all have logos that are sitting up on the wall here that we've all grown fond of, we have supported, and that's a good thing at the end of the day. But through the pandemic and these supply shortages, it's forced us to look beyond what we possibly used all the time, and it's opened up some doors for us, quite frankly.
Yeah.
The one thing we will never sacrifice is quality. It's got to be quality parts. And what you find is when our options that are out there, they were always there. We just had to discover them.
Yeah.
So, yes. So instead of having maybe one supplier for a particular component, we now have 5.
Right.
A lot of them are OE manufacturers. We're getting them right from the source. So, it's the old necessity drives innovation. Well, that's kind of driven us to look in different avenues that we didn't look before.
Sure, certainly. Jesse, along those same lines, you guys offer tons and tons of parts for, the entire engine. Have you guys noticed any trends in terms of specific parts that are selling more than others, or specific applications or makes that, have been popular in recent years?
So timing is becoming a bigger deal, right? Certainly in a machine shop, they're doing everything, but what can you work on that's relatively easy? Timing is one of them. It's pretty essential too, because if you don't service it, you're going to have some major failures.
Right.
There's certain problem engines out there. We won't mention them, but we certainly are focused on those. And then from an enthusiast standpoint, that's one of the things that's happened during the pandemic, was suddenly all these project cars, things that maybe were sitting in the corner collecting dust, folks had some time to work on them.
Absolutely.
I can't tell you how much LS work we do, right? A lot of old classic big block stuff that we work on. It's kind of fun because some of these engines were new when I started the business, and you know they're dinosaurs, and guys are wanting to rebuild them, and you know, put some extra horsepower into them. So, but yeah, I mean, there's certain failures that are inherent in some of these engines, as technical as they are, that we're having to address, and quite frankly, that's where our part shortages give us a problem.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's not a whole lot of I'll call it reserve sitting out there, so we have to scramble to find components that we know are good enough to put in the engine. So, is there anything specific? I can't really point one out over the other.
Yeah. Well, to your point, you know, the industry has been healthy these last few years, and you know, that's a good thing, and you know, everyone's buying everything. So,
you know, the good thing is by and large, you know, the vehicles that are coming off the line, the engines that are built today, are extremely robust. They've got a long life cycle. They should, because they're not cheap.
Yeah.
And when we get to them, they usually have commercial value to them. You know, a lot of the guys that are, you know, pickup trucks, commercial vehicles, medium duty stuff, they're going to rebuild those until the end of time because they generate revenue at the end of the day. And they're rebuildable. That's the good thing about it. They're good quality. Most of the castings are pretty good, you know, so there's value in rebuilding them.
Right.
Yep.
Yep. Absolutely. Jesse, I want to go back just a quick second. You know, we talked about that change in mentality of finding inventory and going to different sources just out of necessity. But, you know, that's kind of something that the pandemic forced your hand at a little bit. What are some of those other things that came from the pandemic, you know, within EPG and Engine Pro that might be temporary versus something that's, you know, a permanent change for you guys?
That's a good question. Well, I guess some of the original sources that we used have dried up totally. They've totally vacated the business. So we have had to go directly to some of these sources that we never used to have to go to. You know, it's a business of convenience as well. And if someone was a full service, offered us a full line of products, they might not have made them, but they stood behind them. It forced us, as they backed away from it, it forced us to go to the direct source where we may not have done that before. So that's a big change right there.
Right.
Honestly, the big change is the variety that we deal with now. Because, again, we were pretty loyal to certain suppliers. We had confidence in them. They stood behind their product because we stand behind the product. It's also forced us to do some of our own private label business as well. Because, again, if we can't get it from the original sources, we're cutting out some middlemen here, putting it in our own package because we've done all the work anyway. It's basically allowed us to give a pretty good value to our end consumer.
Right.
So that's probably one of the major changes as well. And that pressure will continue as we go forward.
Right. Certainly.
Yep.
Very good. Now, I was actually looking up the press release from when you became president at EPG and Engine Pro, and you know, I'm taking this from that release that, you know, you were tasked with, you know, growth, strategic planning, strengthening the supplier programs and relationships, product line coverage, and new market opportunities. And you know, I just wanted to kind of get your take on the last couple of years and how some of that stuff has been going for you guys.
For sure, the pandemic is I don't want to say changed our priorities, but certainly dominated a lot of our activities. So none of those things have been put on the back burner.
Right.
But honestly, the last year and a half, our focus has been getting parts on the shelf and getting them on there. From a supplier standpoint, that's always a challenge, right? Is to continue the supplier relationship, to develop programs that are good for both of us. Right? We want to grow together. We want to show the value that we bring. And quite frankly, one of the big values that we bring is we have inventory sitting on the shelf. We're not a paper warehouse. You know, we have over 100 distribution points in the United States. We also have 2 international locations, one in Australia and one in the Netherlands.
Okay.
And they have inventory. they're sitting on the shelf. We also call on these customers as well. We physically go into these places of business. And the old ways of doing that, we actually physically walked in.
Yeah.
And we still want to do that because we get so much good feedback from them. But let's face it, trying to find time to do that, for them to make time. So we're having to explore new ways to reach the customer, maybe in non-traditional ways.
Right.
And slowly but surely, we're doing that. In the coming year, you'll probably see some changes in our group in that respect. It only makes us better.
Right.
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 Also, you're seeing combinations of companies coming together. That's creating a major challenge. I'm sure the acquisitions and mergers are not over.
Yeah.
And making sure that that value stream is ensured, that they understand the value that we bring is essential.
Yep.
Again, there's not a lot of folks that are in the engine parts specialist business, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
It's pretty technical.
Yep.
And it's a pretty big inventory investment, right? Remember, I used to work for a company that sold filters too. So my filter friends out there, certainly not denigrating anything, but filters turn like crazy, right? It's a maintenance item.
Right.
Folks are never mad when they have to change a filter.
Yep.
In our business, there's such a proliferation of components. Usually when they're failing, nobody's happy. And it's a challenge. So not everybody can play in that market anymore. A typical jobber store 30 years ago, they sold rings, they sold
Right.
bearings, they sold all those components. I'm not saying they don't today, but that's really not their focus anymore.
Right.
So that's kind of fallen to the engine parts specialists like ourselves.
Certainly. Certainly. Yeah, it's great to get your perspective. You've been around the industry so long and seen all these things happen in real time, and we appreciate you being in here today. I want to leave you with one last question and just
Sure.
A future outlook. From your perspective on the industry and at EPG and Engine Pro, what do you possibly see coming down the pipeline in a year or so?
Well, for sure, we're going to see as our OE brothers get chips and start building product, some of this demand, and I don't want to call it false demand, is going to start to wane, right? I think the folks that have done a good job through these challenging times are going to come out the other end even stronger than before.
Sure.
I mentioned that I think there will be a lot of mergers going on. A lot of companies are being acquired. You see some private equities that are gobbling up a lot of companies. But at the end of the day, the base customer is still the base customer. So we can't lose sight of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where folks like ourselves that are customer focused are going to excel. The way we deliver parts is going to certainly change as we go forward. Let's face it, Amazon changed everything. I have a daughter that I don't think she's stepped in a mall, thank God, in a long, long time, but there's an Amazon truck seems to deliver to her house on a weekly basis. And I hate to admit it, it does to my house now too. So buying habits have changed, and we have to, that's where I see the big changes. We have to adjust to that as well.
Yeah.
But it's exciting times.
Yeah.
30 years ago, we thought times were tough. People think times are tough now. 20 years from now, folks are going to look back and say, well, these were the good times, right? So all that tells you is you just have to adjust to the times, and you will profit.
Constant evolution, for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, Jesse, we appreciate you being here, and I appreciate the time. And guys, I just want to thank you guys all for watching. Make sure you're checking out Engine Parts Group and Engine Pro and seeing all the parts that they've got available. You can also check out their Shop Solutions series, which is in Engine Builder every month. If you got something to submit, please do that. And of course, check out Engine Builder for more engine content. And we'll see you guys next time.